Well, good morning. Look at you all out here on this cold morning. I love it when it first gets cold like this. Anyway, fabulous. Well, as you said, last week we started a new series, Practicing Generosity. We're looking at Jesus' teachings on money. Well, quite a few years ago, my grandpa asked my mom what she would do if she had $1,000,000. Well, she didn't have to think very long. She said, I would buy a cabin in the mountains. Now, about 10 very hard years later for my parents, they really went through a lot in that time. They were counseled, you guys, you need to just go and get away for a while. And they thought, I know. Let's go check out that trailhead that we found. Now, this trailhead, it's at Green River Lakes in western Wyoming, and it is at the end of 50 miles of miserable gravel road. It was a real adventure just driving on that road. And there's a trailhead that was full of rental cars from Denver. And they thought, what's going on here? So they went back, and there were all those rental cars from Denver again. It turned out that the trailhead was at a backpacking area that was very well known in the backpacking community. And they'd go into the Bridger Teton Wilderness in the Wind River Range. It was fabulous for backpacking. Well, there's a primitive campground there, and that was right up their alley. I don't know if I ever told you how amazing my parents are. They truly are. And so they set up camp, and Mom noticed that there's a cabin, here you go, at the end of the lake. And this is the cabin. And she said, who gets to live there? Well, the campground hosts do. And she said, well, sign us up. And they're my parents. And they had been volunteering for several summers with the National Forest Service as campground hosts in different states. And a year or two later, they got a call, and they were offered this spot. And you go as soon as the snows are off the road, and you stay through Labor Day. So you're there all summer long. Now let me tell you about this place. It was started as a dude ranch back in the 1920s. And lots of famous people went there. Jack Dempsey, the world heavyweight champ, went there to hunt. And eventually, the owner of the ranch built this building as his home. And when the Forest Service came and bought the land, they tore everything down, pretty much, except for this building. Now, I wanted to show you the lakeside because it was full of windows. So here are the windows. I found a picture from when it was first built and the view that they had. So this cabin, I'm sure it was so much more than Mom ever dreamed of. And they got paid to live there. Yes, Dad was the campground host and Mom was the information specialist at the trailhead, which meant she sat out there with her book and she got to dish out the latest dirt on the trails. Perfect for her. They took care of it, though. And they did a good job of it because they were asked back the next summer. In fact, they spent 10 summers there. God is so good. They didn't own the cabin. They were the caretakers. And the same is true with us. We don't own things. It all belongs to God. We are caretakers. Now, when most of us think about our relationship to our home and our stuff and our money, we don't think of ourselves as caretakers. We believe that all of those things are ours, but that is not the view of Jesus. Now, Jesus talked about money way more than any other topic, more than heaven, more than following him, because money is the chief competition for your heart. And where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, I have to wonder, and this is just conjecture on my part, did Jesus ever even touch the stuff? Right? He had Judas handle the money, and we know how that turned out. And when Peter came up to him once and said, do we pay this tax? Jesus didn't pull a shekel out of his pocket. He said, go fishing, and you'll catch a fish with a coin in it. How bizarre is that? And almost half of Jesus' parables have to do with how we handle our resources. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 12, and this is one of his longest teachings on money and generosity. Now, Jesus had just lambasted the Pharisees for their hypocrisy, and a huge crowd was there, so much so that they were stepping on each other. And in the middle, someone hollers out to him and says, "Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus uses that as an opportunity to springboard into his favorite topic, which is our attitude towards money and stuff. In the middle, he says, "I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothes. Consider the birds, like we just sang about, right? Think about the flowers in the field. Your Father takes care of them. You have such little faith. Don't worry about what you eat or what you wear. Your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given you as well. Don't be afraid, little flock." And don't you love that? That is so tender. Don't be afraid, little flock. For your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So you see how stuff and money competes for your heart. Now he follows up with this parable, and it's a long one, so stay with me. "Be dressed and ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for a master returning from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Truly, I tell you," I've never seen this sentence before. "I tell you, the master will dress himself to serve, and will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them." So we're like the servants of a wealthy man taking care of his house and waiting for him. And if he finds us ready to open the door for him when he comes, he will serve us. This is the upside-down kingdom of Jesus. God is the rich, generous master who takes the place of a servant to his servants. The parable continues. "It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the middle of the night or towards daybreak. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. Meaning, if he does a good job caring for his master's house, the master will give him even more resources to take care of. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming, and he begins to beat the other servants, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come in a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour when he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. Ouch. Now, in Rome, the servant caretaker was often a slave over whom the master had total control of life or death. So they understood this. And then, to summarize, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So Jesus, he's going to come back to his house here, and we are taking care of it, waiting for his return. And this parable is a warning. Be alert, be faithful. The master has entrusted this house to you. And whenever you look at passages about Jesus coming back, you always see this warning. Be alert. So Jesus' view of wealth. The radical view that Jesus is describing in this parable is called stewardship, which is not a word you hear a whole lot these days. But stewardship is defined as the active and responsible management of God's creation for God's purposes. The active, you take part in it. You don't just coast through this. And responsible management of God's creation for God's purposes. Now, this was just as radical in Jesus' day as it is in ours. And there are three basic components to the biblical view of stewardship. First of all, this is an easy one. God owns it all. Now, back then, there were two basic views of wealth. There was non-ownership, kind of a Greek idea, where everything belonged to society as a whole, for the benefit of society as a whole. And an example might be like the Amana colonies when it got started. They had community kitchens, and you might be assigned to work in the, take care of the cattle, but it was all put in one pot for the good of everyone. Now the second, something we're more familiar with, is ownership. This was the Roman view. You had absolutely authority over your stuff. If you wanted to burn your barn down, have at it. And this is the majority view of the West today. Now, like when someone knocks on your door and says, I see you need a new roof, right? And it gets to the point where you go, okay, I've said no thank you, and now I'm saying you need to get off of my porch, right? You both totally understand what's going on here. Ownership. Okay, but God's view is stewardship or caretaking. God is the owner, and we're the caretaker. I wonder if I had said, okay, now you need to get off of God's porch. I wonder what kind of turn the conversation might have taken. Now, this concept of caretaking, stewardship, is found throughout the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he breathed his breath into Adam. Life itself is from God. And he made Adam a fabulous garden to work and take care of. So Adam, from the very start, was a caretaker of God's garden. And in Old Testament law, God gave Israel the promised land, but they couldn't sell anything permanently. It had to revert back to the original family because it was ultimately God's land, and they were living there as foreigners and strangers. And in Deuteronomy, we see this verse. To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. So this is found all the way through the Bible, and here is Jesus saying it in this parable. God owns it all. Sure, we buy, we sell, we farm, we build and invest, but actually we are caretakers. We aren't the owners. There's a sobering verse in Job, and this is God speaking. He says, "Who has given to me that I should repay? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine." Let's be honest here. There is nothing we can give him. It is all his already. What does God owe you? He's the great giver. Okay, second, we are entrusted by God with resources in order to do good. Now, many of us live under the false assumption that whatever money we earn or inherit or win in the lottery is ours to consume. But we need to realize that not all of the money is to spend on ourselves. Of course, some of it is. You put a roof over your head, you feed your family, and some of it is also for enjoying your life. I think of Mom and Dad in that cabin. That was such a good place to be untethered from the temptation of things. There was no place out there to spend any money, right? Couldn't order a pizza in, you couldn't go catch a movie. Groceries were 50 miles down that terrible road. And there was nothing in sight that could be owned. not the mountains, not the moose or the osprey. It was all obviously God's, and also all there for their enjoyment. 1 Timothy says that God richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Okay, so full disclosure here. We bought a new car last summer. It's got a manual transmission. It's fast. It is fun. We did not take that decision lightly. We prayed for weeks about that before we ordered it. We really did. And we sought godly advice, godly counsel. So we get the enjoyment bit. But our money is not all to spend. Some of it is for the poor and needy. Some of it is to support the church and to spread the gospel. Some of it is to build for the future, for what God has put in our heart for our family and for our business, our kingdom dream. But we are entrusted by God with his resources to channel every dollar to the right place. We are stewards. An old word. Now today, maybe asset manager makes more sense. In finance, that's someone who's entrusted to invest other people's money. So how this works, say you have $1 million, and I say that because it's a nice round number, makes the math easy. $1 million, maybe in your 401k, and you turn it over to a financial advisor, to an asset manager, to invest for you. Okay, so suppose at the end of the year, earns $100,000 for you. Okay, well, they would get a percentage of the total. So if it was 1%, that'd be $11,000 that they get for their services, and you'd have $89,000 in growth. Okay, that's a win-win situation. Okay, suppose they had lost $100,000 though. Well, you'd probably be pulling your money out and finding another manager, right? What if they had earned $100,000 but went and spent it on, a boat? You'd be calling the authorities and hoping that they ended up on the news. What if they earned $1 million for you? I'd be, scraping up as much as I could to give them more to manage for me. Okay, in this illustration, the one with $1 million is God, and you are the asset manager. He is handing resources to you to actively and responsibly manage. And those who manage or steward God's resources well are given more resources to manage. All right, the third point. God blesses us so we can give more, not just have more. Now listen to Paul in this hallmark passage on generosity. There had been a famine in Jerusalem, and the church was suffering. Paul is up gathering an offering from the churches in Greece and Macedonia that he's going to take to Jerusalem for their relief. And in 2 Corinthians, he says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So don't be coerced to give. How is he stirring your heart? And then you can give joyfully. And God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things, this is good stuff, in all things, at all time, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. And listen to this, having all that you need, right, you will abound in good work. As it is written, they have freely scattered the gifts to the poor, their righteousness endures forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. Now, this kind of sounds like the prosperity gospel, but note, you'll be enriched so that you could be generous. It's not give so you will get more, but give so you can give more. Now, when we give, when we're good stewards of what has been entrusted to us, God often does give us more. I mean, it could be money, it could be opportunity, relationship. If you give, God will give back a net increase in some way, because you cannot outgive God. Now, since retirement, we have had so many crazy opportunities just drop into our lap. I mean, nothing that we were looking for, nothing we could ever have expected. We can't explain it except to say that God has just been good. And the point is not to make us rich, but to make us more generous. As James Merritt says, God blesses us to raise our standard of giving, not our standard of living. So to review, God owns it all. We are entrusted with his resources to do good, and God blesses us so we can give more, not just have more. So if this is true, the question is less, how much should I give, and more, how much should I keep? Now, tithing is a traditional church practice, right? And the rule is, you give 10%, and you keep the other 90% for whatever you want. At least that's kind of how we looked at it for a long, long time. And we pretty much lived that way. We've given our tithe, now here we go. The rest is ours. But it doesn't work that way with our time, which is another resource that God provides for us. I mean, you're all here on this chilly Sunday morning. That doesn't mean you go and spend the rest of the week whatever way you want to, right? Angry with your neighbor and kicking the dog. No. Jesus bought all of you, right? I lost my place. It's all God's, and we're entrusted to use 100% of it wisely. Now, Ken and I, my husband, we spent a lot of our lives getting this wrong. And when we finally started to understand how this is really supposed to work, that all of it is God's and we need to be wise with all of it, everything changed. Everything changed. We stopped wanting so much stuff. And everything was on the table. I mean, for me, it was vacation. No. You don't touch my vacation. Don't ask how much it costs, because I'm not even willing to add it up myself. I do not want to know. That's where I was. Okay, but we got more intentional with our money. We paid off our debts. And this is when our kids were in college. So it was a time of simple pleasures, let me tell you. But we found ourselves at the end of it all so much freer to give when God asked us to. Now, we don't always get it right today. I'm not saying that. We're still growing in this area. But come on in. The water's fine. And there's no cut and dry guidance given here. What do you keep? What do you give? What's an appropriate standard of living? I need to be wise, but it's also for us to enjoy. The New Testament doesn't spell it out for you. So you are called to discernment, to listen deeply to God because you want to do his will. It's the relationship that he's after, right? Yeah, but isn't it fascinating to watch how other people spend their money? I kind of fell into this when I was a checker at a grocery store in high school. Like, I can't believe they bought that brand of orange juice. It was bad. So it's so easy to point the finger at someone else. It's so tempting to do that, but don't fall for that. I remember this verse in Romans 14. Only the Lord can decide. Oh, wait. What right do I have to criticize someone else's servant? Right? We're all answering to God. Only their Lord can decide if they're doing right, and the Lord will make sure that they do right. It's between them and God, just like it's between me and God. Here in Paul's letters, though, we do find some basic guidelines on generosity. Our giving should be regular, not sporadic. He says, on the first day of the week, each of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income. Do it When you get paid, it should be the top line in your budget. Do it when it's easy. Do it when it is a pure act of faith. It should be proportional. Set aside some money in keeping with your income, which seems to say that the more money you make, the greater percentage you should give. And even if you're struggling to make ends meet, you're still called to generosity. It says each of you set aside some money. It's going to look different if you're living paycheck to paycheck than if you have way more than you need to live on. It should be sacrificial. They gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. It should hurt a little bit. You may need to give up some things in order to give. Now, for us, it wasn't easy to watch people taking trips and buying fun things while we were faithfully supporting our church. But we have absolutely no regrets. It should be voluntary. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. Discern God's move in your heart. And it should be joyful, for God loves a cheerful giver. God is not interested in grumpy money. Yes, and that holds for service, too. Remember Tim Homer once saying, people just need to understand that there is so much joy when you serve. We were at the YMCA supportive housing a few weeks ago, and this is a transitional housing that brings people that have been homeless off the street, gives them a place to stay while they learn job skills and save up money for deposits so they can be out on their own. And if you've never been, you need to go. It's only an hour and a half of commitment, and it's awesome. We were talking to a staffer there, and she said that her goal is that volunteers leave empowered. I thought that was really interesting, empowered. Now, when we left, we felt connected. They taught me how to do a proper fist bump, because I'm clueless. And we felt joyful, absolutely. Giving and serving brings joy. It also should be motivated by apprenticeship to Jesus. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Though he was rich, for your sake he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. He was generous for our sake. And if we're practicing the way, be with Jesus, become like him, do as he did, we will also be generous. And when you know God is asking you to give something, you give, not to get more back, but to please him, to be more like Jesus. So a steward is one who, as an act of apprenticeship to Jesus, is working to channel God's resources for good. So there are guidelines here, but not clear rules. So you can say, Father, thank you for the gift of these resources. What do you want me to do with them? How many turkeys should I sponsor? We get that specific at our house. He can tell you how many turkeys you should sponsor. Now, do you do this? Do you seek God's leading on giving? It is an opportunity to get to know his voice, to get to know his heart. It's that relationship that you want to cultivate. And if you're not, you're missing out on joy and honestly, some good fun. Now there's a photo on our fridge. Here we go. We have a friend who trains pastors. He's overseas. And some of the pastors go and minister in churches that are in countries that are closed to the gospel. And once we got a bonus, and we said, we have some money. It wasn't a lot of money that we want to give. Do you have a place for this? And he said, yes, there's a couple. There's a couple who live in one of these closed countries, and they need a home. And if they had a home that had enough area for a church, they would allow a church to meet there. So I said, well, that sounds great. And a few months later, we got this photo. And the home was completed, and a church did start meeting there. And 20 years later, a church is still meeting there. Like, how good is that? Can you beat that for joy? Wasn't a lot of money, but a little money goes so far in so many of these countries. Maybe you don't talk to God about money. Are you afraid that you'll hear something you don't want to hear? Do you believe that more money means more happiness? And I think a lot of the problem is that we can tend to struggle that God will provide with what we need. I'm going to close with an account from Matthew 16. And let me set it up, let you know that leaven is a symbol for sin throughout the Bible. So Jesus and his disciples are in a boat, like they do, right? And Jesus says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Oops, I forgot to buy bread. Do you have any bread? No? No one picked up bread. He's saying this because we forgot the bread. Baby believers, haven't you caught on yet? Don't you remember the 5 loaves and the 5,000 that we fed? Don't you remember the 7 loaves and the 4,000? Haven't you realized yet that bread isn't the problem? Now, I'm trying not to sound snarky, but he was stern and he was frustrated. Bread is not a problem. He has got that. What are you still worrying about? How many times has God provided for you? How many times has he miraculously stepped in? When have you ever gone without something that you need? Don't waste energy. Don't worry about the things that you need. He has got that. Maybe the disciples couldn't understand what he was saying because they were worried about bread. Instead, press forward into his kingdom. Manage what he has provided to feed the poor, send out the gospel, defend the powerless and oppressed. Your God is not stingy. He is a loving Father who wants to bless you and form you into a son or daughter who is like himself, generous and joyful. It is our honor to steward the resources he has entrusted to us. So the invitation this week is to radically rethink your relationship to your money and your resources. Not as an owner, but as a caretaker, as an asset manager, and to begin a lifelong journey of listening to the voice of your loving, generous, joyful Father. The prayer team is in the prayer room around back. If you have anything you'd like to have prayed for, please feel free. I'm going to close in prayer. Father, you know that money is the chief competition for our heart. But you own it all, Lord, and we confess that this morning. What can we give you? It is all yours. Thank you that you love us and you care for us, that you have promised to meet our needs when we put your kingdom first. May we never forget that. May we take it to heart. Show us where we need to rethink. We want to be like you. We want to be generous and joyful. Amen.